Today we will examine the inconsistent nature of dog culture and dog nutter ideology. And it is very much indeed a contradictory creed, an informal decree in which dogmatic devotion is guaranteed. Pro-dog ideology is rife with inconsistencies and internal contradictions. Dog culture is reckless, and it deeply affects us. Unfortunately, this cancerous culture is infectious. From enemy to frenemy, they try and fail to dissect us. All their pitiful, insidious, and shitty little videos did is collect dust. Hello and welcome back to Demystifying the Dog.
War never changes. It is important to understand that what we are engaged in here is, at least in large part, an ideological battle. On one level, pro-dog ideology shouldn't be too difficult to dismantle. This is because of how many absurd contradictions it contains. As stated before, it is rife with such logical inconsistencies and internal contradictions. So, where to start? I suppose we can begin with the law. Having an ill-tempered, violent, massive dog which you know will tear an intruder to shreds is the same as having a particularly nasty booby trap set up in your home or somewhere within your property. From a legal standpoint, you are well within your rights to defend yourself from an intruder who breaks in, and really, this should go without saying. However, under the law in many places, it is illegal to set up booby traps in advance. This certainly applies in the United States, which is one of the biggest dog nutter countries there is. Yet, dogs are an exception to this general rule. It is also worth noting that a dog simply cannot distinguish between a trespasser and a visitor. These defective and dysfunctional domestic terrorists do not understand that people have jobs which require them to approach their master's property. Dog nutters insist that they get these beasts for protection. But realistically, a dog will just attack anything it perceives as an enemy, or an object to attack for whatever random reason, and it will do so on sight. Hell, a dog will leave its fenced-in territory if the opportunity presents itself. This the beast will do in order to launch an unprovoked attack against a lizard, a squirrel, a neighborhood cat, or another dog, a wandering child, or a casual jogger, or the postman. None of these are off limits. Dogs have no discernment, and having a dog for protection is like hiring a bodyguard who is liable to assault anyone at random, including many people who pose no threat to you whatsoever. You would, of course, fire them in a heartbeat. It's also rather like having an alarm system that constantly goes off with false starts and false alarms. The end result would be that you'd get rid of it, because it would continually irritate the living hell out of you. Yet that same person will tolerate a dog's incessant barking, or put the bloody dog in their backyard and ignore it somehow, or simply tune it out, and impose its perpetual nuisance barking on all those around them. We learn in nursery school, or hopefully in the home early on, to keep our hands to ourselves. Dogs can go for an entire lifespan and never once learn to keep to themselves. The way they habitually encroach upon other living organisms is truly repugnant. The simple fact is that dogs don't know how to regulate themselves and will readily pounce on, sniff, lick, hump, hound and harass people who want no such contact. This is a major issue us dog-averse individuals have with these pestilential predators. Yet, despite the many flaws of dogs, and despite the litany of reasons why even the dumbest person should understand that these beasts are in no way superior to ourselves, many of these starkers who are inexplicably enamored with dogs harbor a deep and most unsettling resentment for fellow humans. The most vulnerable of all, and here I mean very young children and infants, even they are targets of their extreme misanthropy. Now how's this for a contradiction? Imagine being so misanthropic that you can understand why someone would say they hate babies, but not why they might say they hate dogs as well. In point of fact, I used this specific example precisely because I have personally seen comments online where vitriolic full-on misanthropes, of the dog-loving variety of course, have freely expressed just such a sentiment. Here's what's really ironic and contradictory. As we know, blame the owner, not the dog. This is something dog owners will say until their dog bites or mauls someone. Followed to its natural conclusion, this would frequently result in prison sentences and massive fines every time some beast attacks a person unprovoked. But unfortunately, such mantras are mostly parroted in order to protect aggressive dogs which have drawn blood. Not too long ago, any dog that drew blood was subsequently put down, no questions asked, whereas these days they have these long, pointless so-called investigations. Some owners and shelter workers will knowingly rehome dogs that violently attack toddlers. And of course, this is political. This idea that because dogs are simply acting on instincts, we should then refer to them as innocent, is deeply troubling as well. What's funny is that the same people who attribute an undue level of intelligence to dogs, they will then admit that it's just a stupid dog, once the thing resorts to force, which is within the beast's nature, as we know. Where before it was a superior being, and easily among the smartest organisms, to hear the nutters tell it, now it is a dumb animal that doesn't know any better. Because sure, we can't blame it, even if it is the entity that carries out an attack. Go figure. Dogs are constantly using violence or the threat of it to respond to things in their environment. That is the reality. When they are influenced by a great deal of training, which is essentially a lot of psychological manipulation involving either positive or negative reinforcement, the thing that's worthy of note there is that those instincts are merely being suppressed. This is not a permanent state, and a dog can revert back to its default settings, so to speak, at any moment. I was once told that dogs cannot be guilty because that concept is reserved for people. The same person who said this also told me that dogs are innocent. Let that sink in for a moment. Guilt and innocence are two sides of the same coin. Remember, the same people who will tell you that dogs are innocent will turn around and say that dogs experience guilt when they are caught in the act of destroying personal effects. You know, household items and all the rest of it. Of course, the dog fanatic is engaging in anthropomorphism. But the question remains, for heaven's sake, which one is it? Do dogs actually possess an understanding of right and wrong, or do they not know any better? Because it can't be both. Dog behavior experts will occasionally be honest, if only for a brief moment, whenever they say that dogs have no concept of morality. More importantly, this is correct. But, at the same time, many dog fanatics claim that dogs can somehow sense a bad person and thereby attack them on that basis alone. The plain fact, however, is that dogs are amoral. They have no sense of right and wrong at all. Now, the fact that they cannot tell right from wrong is part of what makes them so dangerous. And just consider the frequency with which they attack children and infants alone, to say nothing of numerous other trespasses. And we are not nearly done, not even close. When dog apologists try to identify lack of training by humans, which is of course imposed on the dog, as the source of its barbarism and betrayal, that is a tacit admission that dogs are inherently bad unless a person steps in and changes the dog's natural tendencies. Just think about this for 2 seconds. If humans don't intervene and alter a dog's natural behavior by some means, then clearly we are the ones making dogs better, not worse. And obviously, by we here, I mean humans in general, though clearly it is only people who choose to be around dogs and who can be bothered with all that, to whom all of this applies. Those of us in the anti-dog crowd are not going to spend any of our precious time manipulating one of these incorrigible house gremlins. Left to their own devices, dogs would be universally loathed by humanity. It is only because it is possible to control some of their behavior, and overwhelmingly this is through the use of food, that dogs are even remotely tolerable to some. Another one for dog lovers to ponder deeply: when a dog does something that happens to be good, it is because the dog itself is inherently good, according to dog worshippers. When, on the other hand, a dog does something wretched, or acts on any number of its dreadful instincts and inclinations, suddenly this is because the dog doesn't know better. Are you noticing a pattern here? Suddenly, the dog is just a dog. or in other words, a simple, hopeless creature that cannot help itself or do anything right without humans to direct its every action, or at least to fundamentally alter its baseline programming. The dog nutter won't phrase it like that exactly, but this is precisely what they are, in fact, saying. That same dumb creature that lacks moral agency, and which is basically a slave to its impulses, magically morphs into a virtuous hero when it does something decent for a change, or perhaps even just something that is morally neutral. In the rare event that one dog stops another from attacking a child, this is not done out of altruism or concern for the child's welfare. It is not out of compassion for the child. That dog is simply following its programming. Perhaps it is its instincts. And just remember, the same entity that is credited with possessing the capacity to experience a guilty conscience over having chewed up your best pair of shoes will think nothing of violently attacking a newborn infant whilst the baby sleeps. This has absolutely nothing to do with how the beast was brought up. The dog wants to attack the child, and so it simply does so, without any hesitation or any qualms about it whatsoever. When the nutter is informed that the most common victims of dog attacks are babies and very young children, whom, by the way, they are actually innocent, not the dog, we might get this sort of response back.
Oh, but children are not innocent.
This is another contradiction, for if children are not innocent, and dogs are on the same level of understanding and development, then why is it only dogs that get to be viewed as innocent? It makes no sense. And of course dogs are not on par with any person, not even a very small child, in terms of brain power or intelligence. It is not even close. One of the most ridiculous contradictions lies in the simultaneously held belief within the dog world that dogs are at once great judges of character, but also great because they do not judge. Once again, both cannot be true. A little more on the topic of children and dogs and contradiction. Dog behavior experts and various dog shills will correctly point out that a child should never be left alone with a dog. However, an indeterminate number of pro-dog companies and organizations actively advertise dogs to children, to families, and everything of the kind. They may show pictures of children hugging dogs, or sleeping next to them, or generally being dangerously close to one of these fanged predators with virtually no frontal lobe, which is exactly what a dog is. Curiously, many of these same experts likewise advise people, and particularly children, to not hug dogs, which, of course, should not be done. But at the same time, this hasn't stopped children's films and cartoons from featuring dogs prominently, often glamorizing them and presenting them in a highly idealized and unrealistic fashion, in an anthropomorphic way, and so as to appeal to children directly. Additionally, many among the dog-obsessed will whinge and moan incessantly about how much a crying infant or a screaming child triggers them. And of course, they probably only bring it up when barking is brought under rightful scrutiny. But then, by some bizarre quirk of physics or psychology, a dog barking its stupid head off for hours on end does not bother them, or is not seen as an issue for others. Then again, a dog owner forced to endure constant barking at close quarters, unless she is just wired wrong, will be compelled to acknowledge how terrible this behavior of dogs is. Then again, on the other hand, many of them are in fact wired wrong clearly, or they wouldn't be dog nutters in the first place. And how's this for irony? A few years ago, there was actually a news story posted on this very website about a woman with at least one annoying yapping dog, and she had the gall to complain that the ultrasonic device, which her neighbor used to counter her dog's incessant barking, was damaging her hearing. Of course, in all likelihood, she was making this up and just wanted the devices taken down. This is not altogether unlike dog lunatics crying about fireworks going off for literally 1 to a few nights per year, while they themselves own a perpetual noise pollution machine that never shuts the hell up. But remember, when dogs want to attack or annoy people, suddenly they are excellent judges of character, and somehow the genius exception to the whole of the animal kingdom. Again, to hear these people tell it. Children are messy, but you are willing to own and pick up after a perpetual fecal factory. You are very punitive when it comes to wanting to prosecute a person who harms a dog in self-defense only. Yet you expect people to treat vicious killer dogs with kid gloves, and you expect them to allow themselves to get bitten. Or, in slightly less extreme cases, you say that only when a dog has a hold of its victim is that person finally justified to practice self-defense, and your dog should get at least one free mauling. Your dog can invade the personal space of others, but heaven forbid a person pushes the overzealous intruder away or assert their own autonomy to not be harassed or harmed. And there is even more. Along similar lines, think of the complaint some dog nutters have about people petting their dogs without the dog's permission. Have these people ever asked themselves when the last time a dog asked for permission to approach a person was? Do dog owners check in with their neighbors and others around them to see if they even want to inhabit a world where a dog encounter is now an inevitability? Perhaps the greatest hypocrisy of all is this: you are an animal lover while owning a predatory carnivore for no good reason, and which actually requires the constant death of many harmless animals to maintain. And let's keep it real. Your fanged artificial predator will happily kill other people's pets if it can, and not even for survival purposes. Just remember, if you only own one type of animal which you revere and prefer to all other animals, you are not an animal lover. You are a filthy, hypocritical, self-righteous dog worshipper. For those who believe that every dog's life matters, and that every dog's life must be preserved at all costs, what is to be done when one dog is viciously attacking another dog? Animal Uncontrol nailed that one a long time ago. Police officers are among the biggest dog lovers on earth, and would probably sacrifice a lot for the canine unit dogs they work closely with, or even the one they likely have at home as a family pet. However, when the rubber meets the road and a vicious dog of any size charges one of them, they certainly don't hesitate to do what needs to be done. It's a simple matter of training and basic self-preservation. Similarly, how many people will, quote, back the blue until an officer is forced to practice self-defense against an attacking loose mutt? This also calls to mind allowing oneself to be licked by a dog on camera when your body language reveals your profound disgust. It's like people are forced to pretend they enjoy being slobbered on by these nasty things. Imagine responding to the accurate critique of pit bulls as a dangerous thing to own by telling somebody that you would pay to watch them get torn apart by a pit bull. This is exactly what a deranged pit nutter once did in an exchange on Quora. Somehow, I'm the evil one when you were the one resorting to violence, at least in your imagination, just as quick as a stinking dog. Dogs are man's best friend, yet historically used as a tool of oppression and subjugation, and easily turned against one man by another. Not that a dog needs much encouragement from a person, or anything else, to act violently against humans. Oh, but the poor overgrown pupper was manipulated by evil humans into doing these things. No, the dog wasn't coerced. Rather, someone took full advantage of its natural ferocity, that is all. And clearly, if dogs were truly our allies, then it would be impossible to utilize them in this fashion.
Dogs are violent. They chew on everything they can get their teeth on. Toys only hold them off until they are torn to shreds, or just not as appealing as a sock, shoe, stuffed animal, or sofa. Dogs are predatory animals. Given the chance, they will kill most creatures smaller than themselves. Squeaky toys are so popular because to a dog, that is the sound of a tiny animal being killed. Few dog owners are willing or able to train out aggressive behavior in their dogs. Some do not even recognize it as aggression. It's all playful, cute, and protective until the dog actually hurts someone. Dogs are too big a responsibility for many of the people who own them. Every park has dog poo on the ground that nobody picked up. Every neighborhood has a dog that barks at its own shadow. Every community has had to mourn the loss of an innocent person attacked by a total sweetheart of a dog, with an owner still in denial that the dog could ever be the problem. After a dog attack, many people mourn the euthanized dog more than the victim. Dog owners often force their dogs into spaces that dogs should not be allowed. Dogs in apartment buildings, dogs in stores, dogs in offices, dogs in hospitals, dogs in restaurants, dogs on buses, dogs on trains, dogs on planes. Too many dog owners do not care if their dog is a nuisance, a health code violation, or a danger to someone with allergies. As long as they are happy, everyone else must accept the situation.